So, good evening. So, I usually just talk for a bit and then we'll do like a 20-minute meditation and then I'll talk a bit more. But, if you have any questions at any point or things you need to ask about, feel free. I'm going to start off tonight with just a little bit about why we meditate um, in the context of the story of Buddha. So, a long time ago, a person named Siddhartha, who was Buddha before he got enlightenment, um, he wanted to understand the point of life. So he undertook a spiritual journey and he gave up his life as a prince uh, to live in poverty. And along his journey, he observed all people from all walks of life. And he noticed they all had one characteristic in common, that they were all suffering in some way. Um, so he became determined to figure out why everyone was suffering and how to obtain freedom from suffering. So he devoted himself to pursuing that answer, and he decided to try all of the various religions that were available at that time. And so he practiced a bunch of different religions, and each time he came up short, he never really found out how to escape suffering. And so he did this for many years. And after like 6 years or so, he hadn't found the answer in the outside world. So he decided to turn his focus inward and sit until he could find the answer within himself. So that's kind of where the practice of meditation came from in this tradition. He sat for days beneath a Bodhi tree, which is like a fig tree. And during that time, he had to battle various desires, his hunger, his discomfort, his desire to sleep. So he began to focus his energy, and he meditated on love. And then one night, he looked up at the sky, and he saw a star shining in the sky. And at that moment, the star became a mirror, and his face became a mirror. And at that point, he could see his mind. And he reached a state beyond birth and life and death. And he finally found the harmony he had been seeking. This was the awakening of Buddha. And after this, he decided to teach other people how to attain enlightenment. And he wanted to help us all understand the true nature of ourself and how to find this harmony in the universe. He did this through teaching meditation and teaching us to put down our opinions, our ego, our sense of self, and our desires, and release ourselves from our karma. Thinking and emotions cloud our mind, and they make it so you can't see your mind. So the idea is to use the meditation as a way to clear your mind. And when your mind is clear, it becomes like a mirror. And when your mind becomes like a mirror, you can see pieces of a reflection of your mind and everything around you. And this is how he explained enlightenment and how to awaken our true nature. So before we meditate tonight, I just wanted to bring that up as a context and tell you to ask yourself the question, what does your mind look like? And what is your mind? And now we'll meditate to try to make our mind clear. So first, we're just going to do a little bit of deeper breathing to just relax ourselves. And so just breathe a little bit slower and a little bit deeper than you normally would. Try to bring the air from your head and your brain and your mouth down into your chest and your heart. And so the idea is to kind of center your mind and your heart through this practice. And just take a few deep breaths. So this is a little technique you can use to just relax yourself at any point in the day. You know, before you go to bed, before you go into a stressful meeting, before you meditate. If you think of this trick, it can really help to relax yourself. So when we meditate tonight, we're going to turn around and face the wall, and we're going to sit with our legs crossed, and then your hands will be right hand, left hand, and touching thumbs and centered in your lap. And the way we practice meditation in Zen is we focus on a mantra. And a mantra is a word or a phrase that you use to focus your attention and push all of the other thoughts out of your mind. So if some other thought starts to creep in, try to come back to your mantra and focus on that and push the other thoughts out. The mantra I suggest to use is the Bodhisattva of Kwanseum Bosal, who is the Bodhisattva of love and compassion. So that's a way to bring the love energy towards you during your meditation. The myth of Kwanseum Bosal is that she has 10,000 eyes and 10,000 hands, so she can see what you need and give you what you need with all of her hands. So with that said, any questions on the meditation? I know we have someone new. Is that all clear? Okay. Yeah. So we're going to turn around and face the wall. I know there's some ambient noise. I apologize. Just try to block that out as best you can. So we'll meditate for about 20 minutes or so. If you get uncomfortable at any point, feel free to stand up and stretch your legs out. Just try to be quiet and respectful of everyone around you. Stand up, stretch for a minute. All right. Just shake your legs out a little. If you're uncomfortable, we're about to sit down again facing each other. So Buddha explained that heaven was freedom from suffering, and he called that nirvana. So how do you free yourself from suffering? What do you think the answer to that is? From the moment you came into this life, you're suffering, right? You cry to get your first breath. After that, you scream in agony so someone will feed you. You can't feed yourself. Someone, probably your mother, fed you milk and alleviated your suffering. That was a compassionate action that saved your life. And when your stomach was full, you made a warm expression, and the person who fed you felt happy about that. That's the feeling of love. This was your first lesson about compassion and why it's important. Everyone in this world is alive because someone showed them compassion. Why does anyone bother with compassion, though? Why not just live a selfish life and take whatever you need? The reason you need to be compassionate, as in that example, is that's the only true antidote for suffering. It's the only cure for suffering. It's compassion. The reason we act with compassion is because it makes us feel good. When we act with compassion, the feeling of love is reflected back at us from the people we help. If you need an example, try it out sometime. If you feel sad, instead of doing something for yourself, do something for someone else who needs help, and don't expect anything in return, but just see how that makes you feel. I bet you it makes you feel better about whatever your situation is. So why is love important? The idea of love is expressed in so many different religions. Buddha focused his meditation on love. Why do you think he chose this? What is love? Love, I call it the force of creation. So it's the energy that fuels our life, and it's how our mind affects the course of reality. When we create something, we bring something that only exists within our mind, and we bring it out into reality. And that gives us a small reflection of what's inside of us. That's the process of creation. And love is the source of that drive. It helps us to communicate the ideas that we have inside of us and share them with other people, and show them that we share common feelings. And if we put all of this information together that we're sharing, it's like a puzzle within our mind. And if we use that, then we can better understand the fabric of the reality that we live in. In this sense, we're creating a shared consciousness. We're all sharing what's in our mind, and we're learning something about our environment. Everything we do collectively, it ends up creating a larger reflection that can help us understand the world we live in. And in this way, seeking the truth about reality is not so different from science. But the difference is science limits itself to the material world. The mind can't be measured. You need a different set of tools to understand it. So anytime we create action, we change reality. An idea starts in our mind, and then we use our body to introduce it into material reality. And when we create something, we define what that is with a concept based on something that we already know and we're already familiar with. Is that concept a real thing, or does it only exist within our mind? Does reality depend on our shared understanding of what everything is, or is it purely subjective, like our perception? So someone made this object, right? Is this object a table, or is it just a collection of atoms and molecules? Or is it both? Is the reality we live in, is that made up of matter, or is it just another concept in our mind? To understand the foundation of reality, you have to be able to answer these questions. What is matter? Can someone show you what matter is? Or is it just a concept of the mind? And then what is the mind? The foundation of everything. And then it raises the question, what is consciousness? How do we define it? What things in our reality are conscious? How do we know this? It brings up a lot of interesting questions. What is life? When does life begin? Where was your consciousness before you were born? Where does it go after you die? Science doesn't really have the tools to answer these questions. Science limits itself to the study of matter and what you can observe. The only way you can find these answers is through experience. And the best tools we have to find the answers about our mind and consciousness the best tool we have is meditation. My experience with this practice is that when you let go of your ego and opinion and desire, you see that the boundary lines that we draw around our body, they're not as clear as they appear. Our bodies are constantly exchanging with the environment that we're in. So our survival really depends on understanding our relationship to what we're surrounded by. When you start to understand that we're directly connected and affected by everything in our surroundings, that's when you realize that the more information you have, the better you are. And that's when it makes sense to share our experiences with each other. That's the best way we can understand what's going on. And it makes sense in that it's in our own self-interest to understand this and to teach other people this and to share our experiences. It becomes in our own self-interest. And also, don't forget, the only reason any of us are here is because someone showed us compassion initially when we were babies. So when you realize this, it makes actually logical and rational sense to act with compassion and let love guide your actions. So many people, they wonder, like, what's the purpose of life? I suggest to you that the purpose of life is to find heaven. It's how to free yourself from this suffering. To find the way to heaven, to find that, you have to listen to your heart. Meditate. Let go of your ego. Let go of your opinions. Let go of your desires. Keep love in your heart and act only with compassion. Then eventually the path to heaven will reveal itself to you. So I wish you luck in that journey. Any questions about what I said? I'm curious. Any thoughts? You always have a thought.
Yes, but I want space.
Anyone? I kind of got into some deep territory there today. What do you think?
That's beautiful.
I have a question.
Okay.
How could you maintain like a Zen life and the life that we live in? That like people like crazy for like your ego or your opinion. They look for it.
It's a great question. That was one of my very first struggles getting into Buddhism. It was like, how do you do this without going onto a mountain and just separating yourself from everybody else?
Can you really be Zen in this day and age where you have to work every day and people want to know what you think about something?
Yeah, I think it's okay to tell people what you think, and you have to survive in some way, right? So the world isn't a perfect place. If you want to eat, you're going to have to actually kill something, whether it's a plant or an animal. So, it's not always, it's not so black and white, right? So you always have to make choices. But the idea is to keep these things in mind and more like prevalent in your daily life. Like, listen to your heart. If it's telling you something is bad, it's worth listening to. And it's hard to know sometimes, when you get caught up in things, what is really good and good for the situation, and what's not. That's why having a routine of meditation becomes very important, because you're constantly putting that down, cleaning it out, and even when things are really good and you're really happy, you still need to do that, because eventually there's always a flip side of when that goes away and you're left without that feeling. And it's good to use meditation to keep your mind clear, and then as you become more committed to that practice, then you will be less influenced. You'll have, how do I say this? My experience was, when I started, it was very difficult. It's very difficult to make time in your day to meditate and find those spaces. And on one of the first classes I taught here, I mentioned that just trying to take a minute every day to meditate would be a very helpful practice. And then if a minute becomes easy, try to expand on that, or maybe take a minute in the beginning of the day and the end of the day. The idea is just to keep practicing, and you get better at it. And the idea then is that as things come in, they start to clutter your mind, and you start to be confused about, is this something I'm doing for a reason I believe in, or am I just doing this to satisfy some part of my ego, or something I don't really believe in, or I don't believe that's the correct path for myself. When you have that practice embedded into your day, then you get better at just flushing out all of that stuff and coming back to that place where you're acting with your heart. And yeah, we all have to do things we don't like doing, over the course of a day. But I think if you really look at it, like, eating a piece of meat, something died for that. Eating a vegetable, something died for that. So you're creating this karma that you need to keep trying to clear out. And one of the things that I was always taught through my teacher was, only take what you need. And that way, then you're not creating more things in karma that you have to deal with. So don't take a lot of food that you don't need. Then when someone else is hungry, there's food for them. And then taking the idea of meditation and trying to make all of your actions become a meditation. So not just when you're sitting and clearing your mind, anything you do in your life try not to let thinking come between you and that thing. When you're eating, just eat. When you're working, just work. Focus on the task at hand, and then that task becomes a meditation. So when I do, martial arts was my first art, but when I do any art form, I try to focus on that and not let other thoughts come in and get in between me and my work. And so when you do that for a while, you start to reach like a flow state, and then that is like a feeling of a moving meditation. You're not thinking about other things. And a lot of times when you do start to think about something else, that's when you make mistakes in whatever you're doing. And I think that might help you to navigate. I don't have the answers for, all of the decisions you have to make throughout your day. And I'm sure not all of them are easy decisions. Everybody has to make hard decisions. And about just whatever you're doing, even if it's good, it creates karma. So it's a lot harder to clear out the bad things. Those stick to you longer. So just try not to create too much karma, and good or bad, and try to, but especially not bad things you don't want to be attached to you. And then use meditation to put that all down. And then that automatically blurs the boundaries between what's you and what's the rest of the world and the rest of the universe. Because you start to, when I say ego, I mean like your sense of yourself, literally, like that I am separate from you, and I'm separate from the universe, and I'm separate from the world. Like that is one of those boundary lines I'm talking about that's not real. We've just created it. When you start to look at, your body with a microscope, or the closest you can look, you see cells, but then you see there's space between all the cells. And then you see they're made up of atoms, but atoms are mostly space too. And so that space is what connects everything, and it penetrates all of those lines. And that's a form of emptiness. And I think you might have heard me say before that your mind is empty. And that is really the main thing that we're all a part of, that emptiness. And then we create these ideas and concepts like, this is me, this is a table. But really the lines are not that clear when you start. And when you meditate, it becomes more like that. And so that helps you just realize you're part of everything, and that your goal should be to find harmony in that environment. And that's really what heaven is. And so each individual has to know the answers, has to figure out those answers for themselves. My path to heaven is not the same as yours, right? So the only way I can help you is to help you try to develop these routines of meditation to help you keep your mind clear. And the more it becomes like a mirror, something goes in front of the mirror and you reflect it, but then it leaves, and then you're clear again. So when your thoughts, when all of the things at work that bother you, maybe that you find questionable, you just have to deal with that, what's in the mirror at that time, and then let it go and clear the mirror again. And I think that would be my best advice to you. I don't know if that's the answer you were necessarily looking for, but when you start to meditate more, you create a connection to your heart. Your heart and mind are the same word in the tradition I came from. So it's not like brain and mind are not the same thing. It's heart and mind. So that heart has a voice, and it's your intuition. And when your mind is clear, your intuition will direct you in what to do and what the right action is. if your mind is cluttered with other people's opinions and thoughts and your own different things influencing you, then you might make a decision based on that versus what your heart is telling you. But that's where a lot of like anxiety can come from, when you're not listening to what your heart is telling you. And it's your heart's telling you one thing, but all of these social pressures are telling you to do another thing. And it's not an easy thing to do, but I think that is your guide. And the more you meditate, the more clear that voice becomes, and the more confident you become in the decisions you have to make, even when it's going against the grain of what society tells you. So, yeah, I think that would be, I don't know, any more questions about that? It's a hard answer. And like, I didn't understand. When I heard about Buddhism, I was just like, oh, that sounds great, but that's for monks who go live on a mountain and then they don't. But that's not really, if you separate yourself from everything, that's not really life. You know, you have to live. And so you have to learn. And this is what my teacher taught me, is that he had a temple in the city, and so I could live there and work there. And then I realized, oh, you just have to learn how to incorporate this all into your life somehow. And it literally starts with just creating a space to meditate for a minute, and then learning how to expand that into other parts of your life. It's like the first time you try to do something hard or lift a weight, you know, at first it's really hard, but then you get used to it and the weight feels lighter, you know. So it's like any exercise, but it's an exercise for your mind, the meditation. So just keep working on these things, and I think, you know, keep coming to class, and I'll keep reminding you of them and give you different ways to think about them, and we'll keep practicing this together. But I think ultimately it comes down to changing your life and the way you're doing things and incorporating some of this. And I try not to make it complicated. Like there's not 100 rules you have to follow and then you get to heaven. There's a few things you have to do, and the more you do them, the more it's going to take you in that direction. So just try to keep everything the way you feel it should be set up. Like, you know, if you when you get out of the bed in the morning, make your bed. That's a meditation. When you make a dirty dish, clean your dish and put it back on the shelf. That's a meditation. You know, just keep organizing everything in the way you think it should be. Create time in your day to meditate, and then build off of that. And you can't do everything overnight. Just start with one little thing and try to change that. And then the next day that becomes easy. You do that every day. Then you add something to that. You know, if you try to do everything at once, maybe you do it for a day, then it gets too hard and you don't have the time in your day to figure out like how to do this. Like if you go up onto a mountain and you meditate and you clear your mind, eventually you have to come down and get food and make money and go to work. Like it doesn't work that way. You still have an issue even if your mind is clear for that time. You still have to come back and subject yourself to society. And even when I live at a temple, you know, you think that's the place of perfect harmony, but there's always interpersonal things there too. So, you know, like it's you can do all of these things to try to like separate yourself, but you're still surrounded by people and you have to deal with people. And honestly, the temple is just there to give you like the rituals and help you, to remind you to put yourself in, have these things in your routine, which help you do this. Same as this class. It's just something once in a while to help you get back into the routine and remind yourself to do all these things. I think what you realize in the temple, though, is, when you're surrounded by people and then everything's still not perfect, but that's where the compassion comes in. We all have to work together. We all have to help each other. It's hard for everybody at different times, and that's when we can help each other. It makes the whole journey easier for everybody. And even if you attain enlightenment, you still have to deal with everybody else who doesn't have it.
Yeah, that was like my next question was like, how can you stay zen when other people could just not be at all and want to maybe ruin your peace or.
Yeah, I think that's a valid question. It's hard to explain, but when you reach that point, other people's opinions don't matter. You want to help them, and you want to help them overcome their ignorance, but their opinion of what you're doing won't be relevant, because another way you can express enlightenment in different words is that you 100% believe in yourself. So when you 100% believe in yourself, your mind is clear, you're always trying to make the right actions. Then when you make a mistake or someone's critical of you, it doesn't matter. You're still trying to do what your path in your heart is telling you to do.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway from this class for me is like practicing that compassion. It's not, I feel like it can't, sometimes it's not natural.
Yeah.
Sometimes, like when you're dealt with those like situations.
When someone's mean to you.
Yeah,
it's hard not to react.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think
To keep that.
the way I see that when someone's mean to me is that they're suffering from their own ignorance. They don't understand compassion, and it makes their life miserable. And the only way they know how to deal with it is through being mean and through bullying and things like that. And when you see it as ignorance and not just being mean, then it gives you actually more compassion for them. Like, they need more help than anybody. Like, I've had to work for people in the past that are very mean, and like, they claim to be Buddhists, so they but then you realize how badly they're suffering and how much further they have to go. But to me, like, the meanness, it doesn't bother me. Like, it does on some level, but it only bothers me for like a second. I think
You've like developed that compassion over time. Like you've trained yourself to kind of have that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how to.
100% believe in yourself.
Yeah, and 100% believe in yourself. Like, their thoughts about what I'm doing, it doesn't affect, has no bearing on my destiny.
Yeah.
And they can't really interfere with where I'm going. They might be able to interfere with my ability to make money at a job or something like that, but there's other paths. There's always another way you can. They can only affect you materially. Before you get enlightenment, you'll reach a point where there's no other way to turn. Like, you get so far along, you make all of this progress, you're doing everything right, you're meditating a lot, if I had given 100 Dharma talks, you're able to do everything I told you to do, and everything I suggested, and perfectly, you'll still reach a point where you can't get any further. When you reach that point, and then you'll hit a wall, and you turn around and you'll hit another wall, and you turn right and you hit another wall, and you turn left and you hit another wall, and you feel like, I've done everything, there's no other place to go. when you reach that point, remember your mantra and meditate, because there may be no place to go from here, but there's always a way. There's always another direction, and your mind is infinite and it's eternal, and it allows you to figure the way out of any position. You could get enlightenment if you're stuck in prison. That's that's like an example. There's no way to go. There's nothing else you can do. All of your options have been taken away. Buddha did it sitting. He sat. He just said, I'm going to sit here till I figure it out. So if you keep going, I'm just warning you, that point will come. And the closer you get, the harder it gets to see if you're making progress. So if at first you come a long way, it's like, oh, I do all these things and everything's getting great. And then you'll reach a point where I'm still doing everything, but it's like my progress is only going like this, and maybe up a little bit and some down some days. And then when you get to that level that you're looking for, you feel like you hit a ceiling, like the wall. And that's when the meditation becomes really important. And if you've developed all along these routines, that's the point, is because you have to remember in the moments where it feels like everything is failing, that this is what can save you. So, and these are tools, to get to that place. So, keep trying, keep going. That's my only advice. I wish I could just give you 10 things to do that would solve all of these, but it really comes from like if you wanted to lift 300 pounds, I can't lift 300 pounds, right? So, but eventually if you keep lifting weights every day, you could work yourself up to that, and just keep trying to find that path. I'm really just pointing in the direction, telling you, keep taking steps in that direction. And the more steps you take, the closer you get. And it doesn't end in, when you're done with this life, the next step you take will be in the same direction. So if you spend your whole life walking towards heaven, trying to end your suffering, when your life's over, the next step is in that direction. So just keep that in mind. Keep going. Don't give up, even when it seems hard. And everybody has things that push them off their practice. So, I've talked about this before, but I would meditate every single day, and I do martial arts practice, and I would do bowing and chanting. So I went 16 years of doing that every single day, and then probably like 13 or 14 years of meditating. I'd have to check, but thousands and thousands of days every single day, as much as I could fit into a day. And sometimes you can do a lot, sometimes you can't do as much. And then I had a stroke, and I didn't do it for 4 days while I was in the hospital. And that was like, you wonder if you might think that would disrupt my course, but as soon as I could do it again, I started doing it again. As soon as I got out of the hospital, I couldn't walk for a few days. When I finally could walk, they let me out of the hospital. And then the next day I was home, I started training martial arts again. It was the worst It looked like the worst I've ever done, but I just kept going. And then I didn't even know if that was healthy, but it's what I knew that always got me to the right place. And so I kept doing that, and I kept getting better and better every day. But like my arm wouldn't even really work. I couldn't control it. And that's a big part of doing martial arts. But I just kept like trying to like put it in the right place. And my brain was like kind of broken too. I couldn't remember things. And so I just kept doing that. And then like within a couple days, I could do everything again, but not to my fullest ability, but like I could remember everything again, and I could get through it. And then my doctors, when they finally saw me, they were like blown away at how fast I had recovered. And I totally attribute that to just the practice I had put in beforehand, and then continuing it as soon as I could again. So that's just an example of life getting in the way, and how difficult it can be. And just try to adapt to whatever your situation is. As Buddha observed, and as I have observed, is suffering is the only thing that's guaranteed in life. And the only way to combat that is through compassion, and doing these things for yourself, these meditations, that's compassion towards yourself. That's self-love. And then when you can do it to yourself, then you can learn to do that with others, and share these things that you learn within yourself, share them with others. So, but if you're not taking care of yourself, you're not gonna be able to help people. So it starts with yourself. But I think it's not selfish. It's not, you're doing it for yourself, but you're doing it so you can help others ultimately. So but I think a lot of people, the reason I had this talk today is because I think a lot of people, especially when they get absorbed in their own practice, they start to think too much, like, I'm doing all these things. I'm trying to do everything right. I'm meditating every day. I do everything the teacher told me to do. But there's another part of that is compassion and love. And that extends beyond yourself. And I think that's something sometimes when you're really focused on yourself and like improving yourself, sometimes you forget about compassion, and that you are interacting with the world, and that that can help you get to your goals, because we all are interdependent on each other. So and yeah, I just believe if you can get yourself to one level of potential individually, you're still not at your highest potential unless everybody else around you reaches their highest potential. And then you can expand beyond that together. But as long as even if you're enlightened, as long as you're surrounded by people with a lot of ignorance, it's going to hold back what you're ultimately capable of as far as your progress. And so when you reach a point of comfort, that's probably a sign that it's time to start helping other people. So but it's always a good idea to try to help people. And it's not always clear. Just giving something to someone isn't necessarily help. Sometimes it's helping them. Like they say, if you give a person a fish, they eat for a day. If you teach them how to fish, they can eat for their lifetime. So sometimes it's a little complicated, how to be helpful in the best way. But just keep trying. I think the important thing is that your heart is in the right place, your intentions are in the right place, And then it doesn't matter if you make a mistake. You think you make a mistake, but then it turns out it wasn't a mistake. So your heart will, your eyes can only see so far, your ears can only hear so far, but your mind can sense what's coming from a long way away. And so sometimes if you're really clear, you think you made a mistake, but it's just your mind protecting you from something you can't perceive. So maybe you're late for a meeting that you think you really need to get to, and then you lose your job or something. If your heart is in the right place, even though you don't make the meeting and maybe it has bad consequences, it's probably your mind protecting you from something. Maybe something bad happens if you made it there. It's just, you never know. It works in mysterious ways. But I've had those experiences. Like I write poetry, and sometimes I write things and I don't know where they're coming from or why I wrote them. And months later, I have an opportunity, and I needed that poem. I needed those words at that time. But I had no idea it was for something that was happening in the future. But like something in my intuition prompted me to write, and I wrote these words that just kind of flowed out of me. And then months later, when I couldn't come up with words because I was heartbroken, and I'm talking about when my friend died, I had a eulogy poem for him, and I couldn't explain that. But that's a way of that's one way your mind can prepare you for things. It's not always, it's protecting you, but it's preparing you for what you need in the future. So I've had numerous experiences like that since I started meditating a lot, where I would do things and it kind of didn't make sense rationally, because maybe I should have been focusing on my career, but I decided to do something differently and focus on something else that my heart just was just driving me to do. And so I'd give into that and do it. And I would feel a little crazy doing it. But then in the future, it was exactly what I needed. So the more you do that, I think, and if you're not meditating a lot, it could just be your ego telling you to do things that are not serving you, so that's why you have to figure that out through your own meditation, keeping your mind clear. Then your mind will tell you, and it'll be that voice of your intuition it's not even speaking words, it's just pulling on your heartstrings. And those are important to listen to. Do you have any questions? No? Anyone else? We're over time here, so we started late, but we went over time.
I liked hearing your answer. Yeah, that was great. I liked it a lot.
Thanks. Yeah, I think eventually, I kind of have ideas about what I'm going to talk about, but I'm okay if you guys have questions. I'm okay with starting with questions and just going from there. But I also don't want to come and not have anybody have questions. So, but I think it's more interesting to me to know what you're interested in, and I think I give better answers probably. But
I like hearing you talk in the beginning. That made it a little better.
okay, that's good. Well, thanks for the feedback. I appreciate that. Thank you all for coming tonight. I'll see you next time.